Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to continue creating your themes by walking you through a couple existing themes. It'll be a little bit faster, and I'll be able to talk about how it was done in the existing themes and how it would work implementing it into your own theme. So the first one that we're going to look at is the starter theme that comes with every installation of Pyro. If we go to the core directory and under the PyroCMS vendor, you'll see the starter theme. And this is the one where if you load up the home page, it displays by default. I've got some other text in there from a previous video, but this is what you'd see. And let's take a look at how this is done. So if we open it up, we'll see that the structure is identical to the one that we created in previous videos. This one does have a service provider, and it looks like the only thing it does is overrides error views from the streams views with our own. So if we go to if we create a 404 or a 500 error situation, those will be custom to this theme. And there's an example of how that's done. So that's the only thing that the service provider is doing here, is registering some explicit overrides. So being that those overrides, let's go take a look at those real quick. In the views, if we look at the path, it was in the theme, and this is just a shortcut for saying, instead of saying PyroCMS.theme.starter, because the theme is active when this code is in play, it can be referred to as the active theme by just using the shortcut theme. If we were on the if this was an admin theme, then theme would refer to the active admin theme. So that's how those work. And it's in errors and then 404. So errors and 404. So this is all we're doing here. We've got a simple block of content that's showing the 404, and we're extending the error up here. So let's see, views, and we're extending this view. So that's a pretty simple example of how to explicitly override things from the theme service provider. Let's see. Let's go into our default our default layout. So the first thing we'll notice is that the metadata is not simply included, but it's included as a block, and on top of that it's deferred. And so what this does is it defers the rendering of this block, which means that things deep within content have a better chance of adding to or extending or defining this metadata block than they normally would if it was not deferred. If it wasn't deferred, then it would get rendered top down, outside, inward to the outside, but depending on ordering, you might need to add deferred there in order to allow some things to be overridden. So keep that in mind. And if we look at that partial, we'll see that it's just defining your normal metadata. We've got title here that's using the distribution name, and this is actually getting overridden by your settings. This is kind of like the app.name config value. In fact, I think that's what it falls back to. So it's basically saying the name of the site. We've got a special character here, and then we're translating the meta title like I showed you in the previous videos. This is based on a Bootstrap theme. So what we're doing is just including the normal Bootstrap build as its own, and putting it into the theme.css collection. And then what we're also doing is this is basically all of the custom stuff that goes over Bootstrap. So we're including the framework itself, and then we're customizing it here. And let's open that up real quick. Freelancer. We're importing some variables and mix-ins here, using some variables. So this is less syntax that you all know and love. It's being compiled and stuffed into the theme.css. And you'll notice that this one is explicitly done first, and this one is second. They are loaded in and rendered out in the same order. And it looks like we add one more for Font Awesome, and this can be a little bit interesting. Let's take a look at this. Font Awesome CSS. And you'll notice that the parse is in there. I believe that this is generally done on default. Don't quote me there, but if you need to parse something, it might be a good idea to include the flag anyways. And what that's doing is it's going through and parsing twig first. So it's finding twig tags to parse first, and then it's loading up this content. And all we're doing here is getting an asset path to our fonts. So we're using asset path, and we're returning the path for these font files. And that's about it. You can do the same with background images. For example, if you needed to do image URL or path or image, and then put path down here for an output method, that's how you would do that. It's pretty much the same gist. Then we load up some Google stuff, and then we output the theme.css collection. And then here we include any random styles that might be required by field types or what have you that's being rendered on the screen. We include our JavaScript constants. This is good to know that JavaScript constants are generally used by field types, so it's important that you include this if you plan on doing stuff like that on your theme. And then we've got some other dependencies in there loaded. So let's keep on going down here. Now we've got another partial for navigation. So let's open that up. Navigation. And it looks like this is your standard Bootstrap navigation. I'm using the structure plugin function here. This is included in Pages, and what this is going to do is take the Pages structure, your page structure, and use it to create a navigation tree or a navigation HTML markup. And then this is just adding some classes to it, and that module will be documented so you can take a look at all those separate options and what they do to your output. And then I escape it. So that's pretty generic stuff. Looks like I've got an image in here, and I'm including the logo.ping file from the theme, and I'm adjusting its height and outputting it. And because I'm not including any output method and I'm using the image function, it's going to output the tag, and that's where you see this right here. And here it is. So it takes it from the theme, publishes it automatically, caches it in the public directory under our default application folder, and makes it available to use, and returns the path here where the tag is. So it returns this. As you can see, it's also adjusted the height. And this would be a little bit different than heighten. If we do heighten, that starts manipulating things, but all we're doing here is defining an attribute. Let's see. And then you'll see the structure is very simple right here. Alright, so what's next? We keep going down here. We've got a couple wrappers. We include the breadcrumbs. This could easily be included like this. I believe it might be plural. Let's check. Nope, so that's correct. So you can easily include a generic Bootstrap breadcrumb just like this, or you can include a partial and render loop over them yourselves. And this would be nice if you wanted to include, some wacky markup, or start with include some logic maybe in there. I've run into in the past where, if you're on this page, then include home, and if you're not, then whatever. This is good to know that you can include a partial and render it out yourself. And if you look, it just loops over the template.breadcrumbs. And if you've seen any of the module development videos, you'll see where we push those in the controller. So keep going down, and we get messages, and this is basically interacting with the messages service in Pyro. Is a flash messaging, so any messages that are sent to your they're flashed to the session can get pulled out here and displayed. So if we have success messages, for each message get success, translate, and we go through info, warning, and error for all the same. This is just pulling stuff out of the session and displaying it to the screen. This is one way of doing it. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You could start using like Echo or something to create WebSockets and parse errors as well. This is just the simplest common denominator of how to do it. Then we have our content block, and that brings in the content from the actual CMS or whatever view is actually being rendered that extends this layout. And then we have our footer, and this is a pretty basic just generic HTML footer. We've got a timestamp down here using Twig, and then we do loop through links in the footer menu, and we just do this flat so that we can wrap it in a paragraph tag, and that's probably based on however the theme came in the first place. I just needed to mimic that markup. This is how you would normally you could also render out the navigation menu by just using menu, display, just defining which menu you want to render, adding some classes like this, escape it real quick, and it'll give you more of a standard markup menu rather than this paragraph and then anchor tag inside. Alright, and if we keep going, the last thing that you see is scripts, and this is just a deferred loading of scripts here. We include jQuery, we include the Bootstrap JavaScript file, we include some other stuff. You'll notice it's putting it in theme.js, so it's going to smash all this stuff together into one. We're going to minify the output with the min flag here. Looks like we're including easing from a CDN. And then we're also going to, just like we did in the head for the styles.css, we're going to loop over the scripts.js so that we can include JavaScript from other dependencies in the load, like field types and what have you. So that's how those are included. And that's again, if you're not going to do it, don't worry about it, but this is kind of a nice little safety catch to include in your themes, just so if you render a form, for example, you have all that stuff at hand. So now that we've gone over our existing theme, we've kind of taken a look at how things are done. I'll show you how I typically set up a theme whenever I go to build a website. So let's close this out and back out real quick, and I'm going to delete what we originally made in prior videos here. I'm just going to create a new theme. Usually I name it after the company I am building it for, so we'll do make add-on example.theme, and we'll call it demo, and I'll create that. And from there, what I'll do is go to GitHub, and this is open source. There's nothing special about it. It's just a blueprint basically that I use, and I will use my Bootstrap 4 theme. I'm going to download it, and we'll open that up. And this is basically what I do right here. I copy the resources directory, and I go into the existing, the one that I just made, and I copy and paste. Go ahead and replace everything. And from there, I'm pretty much done. I've just scaffolded my entire theme. I've got my default layout. I've got some partials that layout uses. What I'm going to do now real quick is go in and activate it. And it's not pretty. The purpose of it is not to be pretty and to be done and ready. It's to get me ready to build out the theme. It's going to set up Bootstrap. It's going to set up variables, and it's going to set it up in a way that my variables override Bootstrap's where they are duplicate, and then it's also going to set up some PHP variables that makes it so that I can include variables for my theme for field types and stuff that use variables elsewhere. So if I change my branding and I want to include a field type, for example, that has branded colors in it, it'll pick up my theme my variables.php file in my theme, and it'll allow the compilers to use that when handling assets for field types. So that's what we're going to do here. Real quick, I'm just going to go into settings and close that out and go down to my public theme here, change it to Bootstrap, save and reload, and it's going to look kind of meh. But the important part is as follows. If we take a look at our resources, we've got our fonts all ready to go. We have our initialize script here. I can start adding some general initialization stuff that needs to be done for the theme. We've got vendor folders here ready to use or not use. Honestly, I usually only use Bootstrap and jQuery. I haven't used these other ones in a while. It might be due for an update. We have our styles in SCSS ready to go. We've got animate.css that's been migrated to SCSS. We have our Bootstrap basically clone. The only thing I'm doing different here is if you'll look at the Bootstrap file, I'm including my variables and my mix-ins, and those will basically merge up into this replaces Bootstrap variables completely, and this is just a duplicate in my theme folder as what would normally be here in the Bootstrap folder, but this lets me control the variables for Bootstrap from my own single file. And then same thing with mix-ins, except this one merges into existing mix-ins. So some will be overwritten, some won't be. Let's see here. So that pretty much stays exactly the same. This is all pulled in for font awesome. And then the only thing I have to do is define my theme.css here. I've got my variables and mix-ins. Variables is a duplicate of what comes with Bootstrap, and I can start modifying that right away. And then mix-ins is empty, and I can add things as needed there. So by default, all I need to do, for example, is I'll usually create a directory for layout styles. And let's do a new file for the header. And I'll do something like header and start making all of my classes. And I'll do one for header and footer and different blocks on the home page. Maybe I'll do in a layout, and then I'll have like a components folder with things like typography and alerts and other things that I'm overriding from Bootstrap generally. And then sometimes I'll have a pages directory where I have style sheets that focus on specific pages or specific add-ons, like a specific splash page or what have you, whatever. But you can start ordering these things out, and then all I have to do is include them here. Oops. Import layout header. And when I reload, let's see here, let's do something that we can see. Should be able to see that. When I reload here, all I have to do is modify that one file. And one thing to keep in mind, let's take a look at our views, because we have a default layout here, and this is just a like a normal boilerplate file. And we've got our block defined a little bit different here. This is just a different way to do it in Twig. We've got our footer, messages, which are going to be like alerts and stuff, and then we've got our header, which includes the navigation and not much else, it looks like. And then we've just got some generic navigation here that we can replace either with structure or the menu plugin functions to make that responsive to the content of our site. And if we take a look at the metadata, then again we're all set up. We've got the distribution name, or basically the app name, I think is where it falls back to. And this gets pulled from settings because settings overrides the configuration value on runtime. We've got the name again here, the meta title, which really this should be translated, but we have a favicon up here, or favicon, however you say it, favicon. image URL, and then we just reference the theme, image, favicon. Let's see, we've got our, so this is kind of something that I try and get in the habit of doing. Because I like to have my assets re-rendered every single time I load, I have live enabled, and to ensure that those reload, I do live assets equals public, and that will force reload even if no change is detected. It will force reload the this file, and I put this in a different collection so that the live only applies to build.css, which is considerably smaller than theme.css, so it helps speed things up. The only caveat is if I change something that affects the entire Bootstrap framework, like taking it from 12 to 24 columns, then I need to come back here and run PHP artisan asset clear, and that'll wipe assets completely so that Bootstrap is recompiled. And you'll notice it takes a little bit longer to do that. And then once this loads, because we're only force recompiling that one collection, when this reloads, then it's much faster because we don't have to worry about all that other stuff. That is pretty much all that's going on here. We've got styles are being defined a little bit different here. We're doing path and we're putting them into the HTML style function. Kind of the same gist. You know, there's a few ways to do almost anything. We still have our styles.css, we still have our scripts.js loop here. It doesn't look like we have constants, which should probably be added. I don't see constants in here, and we'll end up running into a situation where we need that. But this is how I would get started generally building something, and then from here I can just start adjusting navigation, I can start adjusting the footer, I can start building out page types, and from there really all it is just adding style sheets and keeping things nice and organized and just adding them to my theme, which again gets pulled into the the build.css, and I force recompile, and then when I'm ready to not force the recompilation every single time, I just remove this, and it kind of takes that extra load off of the step. So if we were to reload now, there's nothing that needs to be recompiled, and it should detect changes automatically in there, but I like that live assets environmental flag just to make sure that we're getting fresh assets every single time. So there you have it. From here, I hope you guys can build some awesome themes. It really is a very easy thing to do, especially if you start with a boilerplate that takes out some of the more monotonous stuff. Like I said, I download this, replace it in a theme that I name after the project that I'm working on, and start getting to markup and styles. It's very quick to deploy. And at the same time, you can see how you can download pretty much any HTML theme ever, WordPress or Drupal or what have you, anything, and bring in the styles and slap them in here, and include them with the asset service, and split up the markup into partials and what have you, and really take something that's designed for a different system and put it into Pyro in a matter of minutes. It really does not take any time at all. It's very easy to do. So if you've got any questions, leave them below. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time.